Hello, everybody. On behalf of Brooklyn Raga Massive, and personally, I'd like to, extend a warm welcome to Alam Khan, uh, great, great Sarode Maestro and son of Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab. For those of you who may not know, Brooklyn Raga Massive is an artist collective been around for almost 9 years now, I think, and we've had presented, many different Indian classical musicians and Indian inspired music, and also collaborations. And it's a great honor for us now to have a workshop by Alam Bhai. And uh, I've, thank you for being here. It's an
Thanks for
honor.
having me. Thanks for having me, Jay and BRM, and it's a pleasure to talk with you and to see you after a long while, even if it's online.
Yeah, hey, likewise, definitely. So, so let me actually pull up the questions 1 second so I can get that going.
Sure.
So feel free for the people watching. Feel free to ask questions, and I will forward them to Alambai as they come in. Um, in the meantime, I just we're happy to have you. So what maybe we can talk a little bit about you know your journey first, like about growing up and how you imbibe this music. Um, or if you feel like talking about anything else, you can do that.
Sure. Well, yeah, I've been playing for oh, since I was 7, and I'm what am I now? 30, almost 39. So quite a long time. And classical has always been there, but I also played some other instruments like guitar and learned production and things like that. And the music I make nowadays is definitely influenced by the other styles of music that I grew up on, being born and raised in the Bay Area here in the States, and having my mother, who is American, and my father being Indian. So, in that sense, I got a lot of different influences musically and things going on in my kicking around in my brain when I make my own kind of contemporary music, especially classical. Remains classical for the most part, but here and there I guess we have our stamps or our unique kind of places that we take the music, which um, may at times go out of not necessarily go out of classical, but bring an element of another style of music into that classical, I will say, while
Yeah,
trying to maintain and not disrupt the raga and the classical tradition. And sometimes if we are disrupting it, we're consider it an embellishment and something where it just gives another color of just the joy of music, just playing the music and showing what the instrument can do, and then
right.
bringing it back into the classical sphere fully. So a lot of different things like that. But all my influences have gotten me to where I am now, classically and otherwise, with contemporary and crossover kinds of projects and stuff like that too. But yeah, and as of what I do now, up to even in this pandemic, is teach at the Ali Akbar College of Music here in Marin County in California in the Bay Area, which is my father's school. I teach there, and obviously online to everyone around the world, which is what's going on now. And and I have my Patreon, and so I have a podcast, and I interview a lot of musicians and people talking about my father coming to the West, and then moving into new subjects now. And yeah, I just have my hands in a lot of different things artistically with the music, whether it's speaking about the music, educating, or simply playing, or trying to push it further into unexplored territory.
Wow, nice. Um, you spoke about how you're spending a lot of in teaching these days. You're spending a lot of time with teaching, and it's an important part of the tradition. And I just wonder if you could speak a little bit about the oral tradition and how that's like and what that means to you. Like like it's writing down is one way of preserving things, but then there are things that can't be written down, and so maybe if you could speak on maybe things that you learned in that way, and maybe some stories or about your father, or
Yeah. Um, well, as you know, this is really a oral tradition in the way that it's taught via the teacher singing or playing their instrument. But notation is a really valuable tool, but it's used after the fact usually. And really, memorization is heavily encouraged because that's the way that it goes inside and you retain it. Whether you're having like you internalize it. Western classical, you're playing the same pieces over and over again, so you're really like you're memorizing them obviously, but you're reading them and then you're memorizing them. But with our kind of music, it's like you learn so much original music that's happening all the time that you really want to strengthen the ability to learn on the spot, so that way your teacher can teach more and you can get more in that in that moment. Like my father would mainly compose all new music every time we'd sit, whether it
wow,
was in a class setting, like a group class setting, or it was a one-on-one setting at home. And my ability, what I got out of it was how much I could grasp in that moment. So he would say sometimes to the class, well, I'm like a well. I can keep on teaching and teaching and teaching, but it depends on how big your bucket is
wow.
to carry the water, right? It's like you guys are already full. Next class, next batch, he would say like, go home, you're full already with your so. And some people, they just don't have that muscle strengthened enough, that memorization, to be able to grasp by ear what's happening fast enough. I think a lot of people rely on notation. So when I have musicians of different styles come and learn Indian music, or people that have never learned music period of any style, getting them to realize that they really should get it in the moment rather than sit there with their pen and be writing it at the same time, like, oh, okay, that's that first line, okay, hold on one sec. If we did that in class, my father, he'd be like, what are you doing? Like, put your pen and paper away. Some people got so good that they could notate so fast as he was doing it, like
Wow.
they could get it and then notate it. But for most of us, it was like, listen, absorb it, get it, play it back, notate it later, record it with your Sony device, he would say. Another thing he would say that was really funny was, we're all Seni Gharana is coming back from Tansen. Yeah, so he would say, and we're the Seni Maihar Gharana. Yeah, and he would say, what are you, the Seni Gharana or the Sony Gharana? He's like, you guys, like you sometimes you come to class, it's like you didn't even practice last week's material. You only listened to it on your tape and on the drive over to class. So he's like, are you guys Sony Gharana or Seni Gharana? Because you're not practicing enough. That's just some funny stuff related to, learning by ear and all that. So yeah, it's super important to have memorization and the ability to pick things up in the moment really fast and increase your bucket or your pail so you can fill more water of knowledge from the well.
Yeah, it's amazing. 'Cause I've grown up listening to your father's recordings, and it's always been inspiring. Like, even if he's playing the same rag, if I hear three different recordings, they all sound different. They're all kind of have this element of this quality of spontaneity to them, and so yeah. So I guess maybe is that like maybe is that the thing that can only be transmitted orally, like that magical kind of quality, or am I just putting words into your?
No, yeah, I think that there's such a thing about the energetic transmission, you know. Whether, I mean, right now we're all having to do it through Zoom and through the internet, but there's still something can happen, whether that's just like you talk to people that are what, like clairvoyants and things like that, and they can read everything over the phone, right? It's like, supposedly, if you believe in it or not. But like seeing someone, there's something about energy, right? There's just something, even if we're looking on the screen, there's still something that's happening. If you're there in person with someone, even more so. I'm so grateful that we do have the internet and this ability to do this in this time period. Otherwise, what would we be doing? Um, I feel like the magic and those magic moments of having, those. I feel like it's really up to the student as much as the teacher, perhaps, because you can have a really good teacher, but the student isn't really getting very much. they're not progressing very far. Or you can have a student that's like really good with not many resources. Actually, maybe not even a single teacher. They're learning, or they learned a little bit. Then they learn from recordings and like YouTube. They're basically good at copying, but still being able to copy a maestro or something sound like that and replicate it on your instrument is a humongous task.
Right.
A lot of people can play all kinds of stuff, but they never even got the tone or they got the feeling right. So if they're just playing stuff back, I mean, it's like, okay, so yeah, you're playing that person's stuff verbatim, but man, that sounds good. So it's like it's also really, so then it's also really up to the student to, you're getting gold from your teacher, right? You're getting all this stuff, but then the student has to like sit with it, analyze it, make it become a part of them, in their pores, in their consciousness, in their cells, everything. And then, something percolates and something happens in there that the teacher can only lead them to and try to show them that. But if it doesn't, some people just won't ever get it. And the people that do, it's because something happened inside. They nurtured it, they worked on it, and then that kind of thing just grew. And I don't know if you can actually teach that.
Right.
It's
Right.
also like it's the journey, it's the personal journey of the student too, the disciple.
Right. That's beautifully said. Yeah.
Yeah, but what do I know? But I mean, that's what I've thought about that subject, sometimes, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, I feel like you could have a great teacher, but it's also a lot of the work lies within the student, or how they bring it all together and how that comes out,
Right.
how they put it all together. Like teacher shows this, shows this, shows that, shows it, but how do you bring it in and have it become part of you and interact with the world, live
Right.
it? How do you live it? You know?
Yeah. I think about. I mean, I'm sure you grew up hearing stories about your grandfather too, Alauddin Khan Sahab, and I think about how he had so many disciples, and they all had their own voice, and they all had, and your father was like such a beautiful like emanation that had a unique quality, and now you have your quality, so that uniqueness, I is maybe, yeah, that's beautiful, and you
Yeah.
want to, you want to play anything? Are you inspired, feeling like playing anything or talking about anything else about related to this?
I don't know. Does anybody have any questions that they've been wanting to, ask me or ask in general? I'm happy to try to answer some of those things,
Okay.
or
So
musically.
far,
Yeah.
we just have one. Somebody wants to know where we can check, where we can find that podcast.
Right. Yeah. So that podcast is part of my subscription platform. It's just which is Patreon. I use Patreon, and I do. It's my first tier. So if you do go to patreon.com/Alam Khan, or just go to my website alamkhan.com, you'll have a link to it. But basically, all my podcasts are part of that, as well as my concerts, my Q&A sessions, my lessons. Part of my lessons that aren't through the college, I teach that too. So I really enjoy the podcast, and I'm actually moving out of the series which I started, which was called Khan in the West, which is all about the early days of the Ali Akbar College, the inception of it, and what it was like to be a student in the 60s and 70s when that first started, when everybody was being drawn to my father and to each other and to the music, and how it exploded in the Bay Area and in the country. All the the hippies and Eastern influences of my father and Pandit Ravi Shankar and all that stuff, and some fascinating stories. I really enjoyed doing that series. And talked to my father's earliest disciples, uh, American disciples, basically. And I'm going to start moving on to other subjects now, and start interviewing. I believe I'm interviewing. Well, I'm not going to say because I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to start interviewing individual musicians now and talking about all things music, basically. From classical to beyond. But starting with classical for sure. It's gonna be good.
Oh wow, that's. I want to check that out. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's radio stuff. It's fun, I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's stuff that's important to me. So like, what better thing could you spend your time doing and then talking about this music and the history of it? It's
yeah,
it's beautiful. It's amazing stuff to me.
Oh,
Yeah, so I mean, we could play some music, or we could go. If anybody wants to know things or specific questions about Sarod or different stuff like that, I can demonstrate things or whatnot, or I could just play some stuff. Either way, feel free to type something if you want. Um, let's see.
okay, there's a question. Two questions.
Hmm.
First, did your grandfather spend time in the USA? Is one question.
Uh huh. Um,
And
no, he did not. He never made it to the U.S., but he did tell my father. He did tell people. I think he told another American student too. Like, when I die, I want to be reborn in the States.
oh yeah,
Yeah, he said when I die, I want to be reborn over there. So, and he loved Western classical music, and he used to listen to it. He loved Beethoven. My father, he was allowed to listen to Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, these kinds of musicians only. He was not allowed to listen to any other music, and it would come on the radio, probably all India radio in the 1920s or 30s when he was a kid. And so my grandfather did go to Paris, though. He did go to Europe. He did spend
okay,
time over there with when he was the musician for the composer for the Uday Shankar dance troupe. That
right.
was when he spent time in Europe, when he sailed there. Right? That's how he met Ravi Shankar, and that's how he invited him to come and study with him.
Wow. Is it true that he studied Western classical music as well?
My grandfather, yes, I believe his first teacher he learned violin, and I believe he learned Western classical.
Mhm.
I have to go back and check that for sure, but I'm pretty sure that some of the first stuff he learned was Western classical, and he basically he absorbed so much material so fast that he basically dried. If we use the well analogy or metaphor, he dried up every teacher, and they were like, "There's no more water. Go to the
Oh,
next," and then he would go to the next, go to the next, go to the next, and that's what he did. And he, at the age of 8, when he ran away from home, he did this, and he went and he spent his whole life doing that. It's a epic tale.
amazing. His
Yeah,
his journey, and he really wanted to uncover every aspect of music, and he learned from so many. Yeah, it's amazing.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
He was.
we have yeah. So another question. What was your routine for practice when you started, and how has it changed as you have progressed?
Uh, well, I mean, I don't think I ever practiced enough, and I certainly don't now, being a father and a person living in this day and age. But all the distractions. But when I was younger, I practiced more. Probably 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever hours a day, whatever it was, whether it was all practice or lessons too. Um, and then I feel like if you can do an hour, 2 hours a day, really focused practice, even an hour a day, really focused practice, you can improve. Basically, whatever you can do, how much you can stay focused in your practice is going to be what you need to do. If you do an hour and the next hour is just messing around and you're not really getting anywhere, or 2 hours and you're just like pushing, because I've got to hit that 4 or 5 or 6 hour thing. I don't know how beneficial that is, other than just like straining yourself. Or maybe you can get some mindless mechanical kind of stuff going and you can get really, really darn good at doing that. But unless you have that like mind body connection and you're really focused, I feel like you can get a lot out of it even in a short amount of time. Zakir Ji used to say that too to like my mother and other people. My mother used to study. She studied tabla for 25 years with Abaji, Allah Raka Khan Sab, and
Mhm.
Zakir Ji and Shapan Ji, and she learned tabla from all these people. And Zakir Ji would used to say that he would just practice 2 hours a day or something like that. But it was really
Right, right.
focused
Very important
practice.
about that. Yeah.
Really focused, and he knew what he wanted to practice, right? So I really think that's one of the key things. One easy way you can do is think like an hour for exercise and stuff like that, and an hour for like composition or improvisation, or maybe an hour for or two for exercises, then an hour for composition, an hour for improvisation, and an hour for listening and analytical listening. I mean, whatever you're doing, be there and be in it. Otherwise, if it's not happening, uh, or if it's happening if it's not happening at all, maybe that's not the thing for you to do at all. Maybe you don't want to do music. But if it's like you're kind of spacing out and you're getting kind of zonked out after a certain amount of time, then just focus on that amount of time that you can do.
Right, right.
And
Well,
that's
we
what I
have
feel.
that's perfect advice for yeah for how to kind of break it up, and because you can't do everything and you can't overstrain yourself too. Yeah. There's another question. Uh, So there are a few questions that are kind of related, but the first one is how the Maihar sit style is different from other styles of Sarod playing, the key features of the Maihar style, and maybe you could even talk about maybe your grandfather's style and your father's style and any differences within that itself, and maybe differences in how you play, or if you want, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, differences in style. Well, first off, the Sarod and my grandfather's style, our style was modified to have more sympathetic strings, Jawari strings. So it has a different resonant quality to it. Um, Other things are the key that we play in. My father, after when him and Ravi Ji, they kind of popularized the Jugal Bandi. They didn't kind of, they did. They popularized the Jugal Bandi between Sitar and Sura. They made it famous.
Mm.
And by doing that, my father raised to the key of his Sarod to C, and Ravi Ji brought it down to C, sometimes C sharp. But he felt that C sounded good for Sarod. He used to play lower like other Gharanas, B or whatever it is, and or between B and C. And by doing that, he found that the Sarod had a certain quality tone wise. And then when in teaching, it was a more universal tone for a lot of people, key for a lot of people of different instrument types to play in, to learn in. So that's one thing. I've experimented playing lower. I like things about it, but there's something about that C tone that gives me the feel of my father and the way I learned. And so I prefer to play in C as well. Other thing is bundish, composition. The types of composition, types of guts. The gut meaning, like the themes, the type of themes. Obviously, that's a huge thing to differentiate Gharanas, is the compositions that came from those Gharanas. They're unique to those schools of music. They differ. Obviously the sounds of some of the things. And then the raga interpretation is there, of course, as well. That's a difference. But fingering, the way that you're playing, and picking styles, those are the main key things I'd say that differentiate Gharanas, and getting into it more, it demands more kind of time to be like the differences between this Gharana and this raga and that one. I can't even tell you what half of that stuff is. Sometimes my father would say things in class like, this version of the raga is the market version.
Yeah.
He's like, this is the common version. This is what a lot of people do. This is
Market.
commonplace. Yeah, like market one. He's like, now this is our version. Or he's like, this is the one that a lot of people just plan to do the same thing. They do this, okay, but like this is the way, and he would differentiate that a lot of times when he taught.
I find that so interesting. The topic of like the same rag, but you find so much variety in approaches and different traditions, different even within the same instrument. But if you go, yeah, so
Yeah, it's
yeah,
there's a lot to be. It's funny. We always talk about being purists and stuff like that, but you watch how each generation kind of pushed the limits. I think of my father in that generation as the old generation.
right.
Like these are the old grandfathers and grandmothers, and they're the ones that doesn't everything before that. I don't know. I mean, that's like, I don't even know. They're old. This is it. So it's
Yeah,
like, but they were radicals, right? So
yeah,
they were more radicals. So they're compared to the other people before them, which is strange. So as traditional and purist it is for ragas and all that stuff, it did definitely change. So I don't know, at a certain point, I don't know how much you can change it before going out of the traditional kind of thing. There's things you can do. I mean, before it becomes a gimmick or something like that, or it's like, look at this technique I do. It's different. It's like, yeah,
yeah.
it's kind of just like a gimmick. But yeah, that's a. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's always room to grow, even if you're not meaning to do it, and you're like, I am doing this traditionally. I think something naturally occurs where something changes,
Right.
right? Like my father was like, I'm playing my father's music. Although when you listen to him, maybe it's not necessarily the raga that was changing, it was maybe the approach on the instrument and the way that he was playing the instrument and giving a certain voice to the instrument
Like a
that
different
changed.
quality, different feeling, vibe. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a big subject.
Maybe well there's another question I can ask, and then if you feel like instead of speaking answering in words you can maybe demonstrate on the Sarod, but the question is could you address how you approach improvisation and especially the push and pull between the freedom of improvisation and the structure, like the ascent and descent of the notes of the raga? That's the question. But if you want to also just demonstrate some of the qualities of Maihar and maybe your father's playing style and your grandfather's style and your style, yes, whatever.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
and I say this to a lot of my students and just to people in general. You know, metaphor, analogy. I never sure which word which one is the more accurate word, but whatever it is, I feel like kind of relating the ragas to cities is a nice way for people to just kind of like wrap their head around what's going on in a way. Um, I feel like a raga, like take New York City, you have Central Park, you got the Statue of Liberty, you've got I don't know what's another landmark, you got some other landmark in New York City, right? You got Times Square, something like that. So so there's a blank map and you have those things, dunk dunk dunk, and you're like cool. So right, so like if we're doing that, then let's see. The first one is for like Rag Coffee, right? Say that. That's Central Park. There's another one. Or maybe it's Zilla Coffee. So you have these like phrases that are like, okay, that's the raga, but it's like, how do you put all the roads that connect these landmarks together?
right.
Each person will have a unique experience that's different than somebody else in the city. But yet, we're all human beings living in the city, so we're all human beings rendering this raga. We all consist of certain notes, 8 notes, 7 notes, and but one person's way of going, maybe they learned one composition, so they learned one road that gets from here to there. Then the next thing to take it further is, okay, what's another road to go there? What's another road to go there? What's another road to go there? And that's why when you're listening to someone, if they're improvising, they'll burn out after a few minutes because they've exhausted everything. Now it just sounds repetitive. It's the same route every time. When you learn maybe the alleyways and you learn the back way and you learn the shortcut and you learn this way, and are you riding on your bike to these landmarks? Are you walking? Is it sunny outside? Is it raining? Is it snowing? Are you with someone else? Are you alone? Are you sad? Are you happy? All of these things fill all of these things give you that unique experience in the city, and the more you know it, the more compositions you've learned that fill in that map, the more you learn of that, the more you're able to experience that city and to show someone else. You're like a tour guide. The more you can show them all those things for a longer amount of time with different options. You're like, well, how can you do the same raga? There's only have 5 notes, 6 notes, 7 notes. How can you play that for 30 minutes? It's like, because I know this city and I can show you all of the things about it. And you know what? I don't even know what's going to happen because it's a new day. Nobody can predict the future, but we know that we walk, we eat, we got to go here, we got to do this. But everything else that happens, we don't know. So in that way, I like to think of the raga as a growing, it's just a forever fluid, evolving thing. We don't know. So we're just living in this, and the compositions serve as roadmaps to give you courses through the city, recordings, concerts that you listen to with people. They're templates, they're versions of the city, but they're somebody else's. You're not living it yourself. When you improvise, you're living it yourself.
Oh, beautifully said. Wow.
That kind of answers a couple of those different things.
Yeah. You feel like playing a little bit in that scene?
Sure. Let's do. Change the Tampura to Ma.
Maybe you can. Yeah. What are you're gonna play?
I'll play some Bagashi Kanra.
Can you talk a little bit about how that works for people who might.
Yeah, so Bagashi Kanra, well, Kanra is there and Bagashri is there, but that's the easy way of explaining things. If it was that easy, it's not like breeding like two different dogs or something, and then it becomes the raga. It's like a lot of people, this is this one and this is that one. I know that raga. It's you take that from that and you take that from that, and it's like, okay. My father was always like, that's not what that means. It's you can take that from that and take that from that, but the feeling of that raga, of this new raga that's in there, is not there by just doing that. And that's that hidden, unseen thing, where you have to spend time and immersion in it, and you have to have guidance and a proper teacher to guide you into how to find that within yourself too, right? That's why the role of the teacher is so important. Bagashri Kanra, it has it has obviously a lot more pa than Bagashri, and a lot more re and Kanra and elements like that. Some people play Shahana more. We play Bagashri Kanra. It differs, but there's some similarities in areas. But it's the kind of raga where I asked my father, why don't you play Bagashri anymore? Well, I used to, but everybody played it, and it got kind of just got kind of like over it. It was just like too much Bagashri. So he's like, I liked Bagashri Kanra, and he would go into heavy alaps in Bagashri Kanra, where Bagashri can kind of lend itself to being serious classical, but also lighter in ways, or it can be if you want. It can also be serious classical, but I don't think there's a light version of Bagashri Kanra because the Kanra is there. I'll play for a few minutes. Anybody has any questions about what's going on or anything else, please feel free to write, but I'll play some music for a bit.
Wow, beautiful, so beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks. Sure, my pleasure.
People are There are many comments about the people enjoying the music and
Good ones. Any any subjects or questions or thoughts people want to talk about or
well, somebody before you started playing, somebody, and maybe you can even relate it to what you just played. They were asking about you know the instruments of that Aladdin concept played, and also sur singar, and maybe stylistically what elements were played on that instrument, and what maybe played on the sarod. Um,
yeah. I mean, when
so,
he played Sursingar and stuff like that, I mean, it was Drupad, kind of style and alap and things like that. So in that way, it shows a lot in my father's playing, obviously, and then my playing, the way that we treat alap and our Drupad ang kind of things that we do, mixed with the later things, the Hyal and all that kind of thing, and Gayaki, whatever. My father one time said to me, "Why does everybody call everything Gayaki?" He's like, "Didn't everything come from the voice anyway?" I was too young to understand what he was talking about anyway at all, but he was thought it was thinking about that one night, and he mentioned it to me, and I was like, "I don't know, Baba." So my point being, my father's playing, my playing, all those things are combinations of all these things, but the Drupad, um, I'd say core, which everything
yeah,
is coming from. My grandfather would used to play that kind of playing on that Sursingar quite a bit. He taught my father, Pishima, my Srimati Annapurna Devi, my aunt, and Ravi and all the other great musicians that he taught
yeah.
on the Sursingar and voice, and he played probably taught them on all those instruments, and then wanted them to, he told my father when my father was young, he would when he was a kid, he had him try out a bunch of different instruments,
Mhm.
and before he settled and said, "Okay, I want you to play sarod." Like,
Oh,
that's sarod is going to be the instrument up. But my father learned on sitar, probably violin, maybe even piano, and what else is there? Plenty of instruments. But he ultimately wanted my father to play sarod, and then he said he wanted him to bring out the effects of all these other instruments on the sarod. So
wow.
maybe that's why my father has such a dynamic range and versatile way of expressing himself through one instrument.
And I've heard that. Is it true that Aladdin concept taught mainly by singing, right? So by not by playing, not while playing, or is
No,
that?
that's what I was saying. I think he played sursingar, violin, singing,
Yeah.
all of it. But I mean, I'm sure he singing is probably the easiest way of teaching people, or the fastest way, where he doesn't have to. But when he's probably in the mood, he would play those other instruments. But perhaps he liked to play those the instruments in his own on his own time too. Maybe more sometimes. But I know he taught on all the instruments. I never
I
saw
have
him
a
play sitar though. I never saw him any pictures of him playing sitar.
okay.
I'll look into that. I'll figure it out. But I always, either sarod, violin, singing, sursingar, tabla. He was on. But besides that, oh, but I mean, he also invented instruments too, like the, what do you call it? The is it the naltarong, the the gun the gun barrels that he turned into the
Oh, I didn't.
xylophone. Yeah, there's the Jaltarong, that was the water. There's Naltar, I forget, one of those things. Anyway, but he basically, he didn't like violence and things like that, so he would take the gun barrels and he would saw them off to make a xylophone ish kind of thing,
Right.
out of gun barrels, and that's when he formed the Maihar band, the first kind of band in India, where they would have lots of different instruments, even Western instruments, and he would have harmonies composed and all those things. I mean, back then the music all sounded kind of, it is very some really beautiful music, and it also had a quality of kind of like a marching band kind of thing, back in the old days. But he was the one that really pioneered that and revolutionized it with and which then made its way into my father's consciousness and the way he made music, because the first time my father ever composed anything, my grandfather told him as a young boy to compose something for the Maihar band.
Mhm.
So my father was a young boy, and the first composition he ever made was either in Maligora or Malgunji. I think it was Malgunji, for the Maihar band. And he grew up amongst these people. These were orphans from Bangladesh.
Wow.
He basically took all of these orphans and housed them and fed them and kept them and gave them jobs as being his orchestra, his band. They call it the band, but it was like kind of like a symphony. And so he took all these orphans and made a whole music symphony kind of thing out of it. And you can see in the old video Baba that's on YouTube where he's playing in the Maidan in the field behind the house, and the temple is in the background, the mountain, and everybody's sitting there. That's the Maihar band. And you know, there's still the Maihar band in India today, which are all everybody in the original one is gone now. They all passed away, but they still play compositions and yeah. So
Yeah, and your father also composed for films, I think, right? A few of them, at least.
yeah, he had the whole part of his life when he was living in Mumbai and Bombay. We always called it Bombay, so I still think of it as Bombay. But
Yeah, I did.
correct thing to say is Mumbai. But you know, to them it
Yeah.
was all Bombay for all those years. But so he that's when he met with Asha and Lata and all of these people, and then Artie Burman, like that he was my father's student. Asha Bhosle's husband, a famous composer, and so my father was around all these great musicians and then other classical musicians as well, and they were all kind of playing music for film things and composing things, and my father made the score for and played on a number of films. The most notable one is probably Hungry Stones, that Kudito Pashan, right? I think that's what it's called. And but has a beautiful one. It has Nikhil Banerjee in it, Ram Narayan in it. It has just incredible music. And then he made the music for Satyajit Ray's Devi film and Merchant Ivory's Householder film and numerous films. But this cool story about that is my grandfather was not happy about it at all when my father was making music for film. He was like, and my father was terrified of his father. So when my grandfather went to the cinema to watch it, my father loved cinema. He would spend the whole day watching movies, he said. He would just go there and watch all day, and he'd drink soda. That's what he said. He used to drink soda pop and watch movies. And so him making music for films back when Bollywood had, that kind of music, which was beautiful. So many beautiful things, very heavily classically influenced. My grandfather, he made the music for it. My grandfather was like, ugh, and he went there, and my father was terrified. He's gonna hate it. He was in a bad mood. He's like, he's gonna leave after a minute. And he sat down and he watched the whole film. And afterwards, he was like, he really liked it. He really liked it because my father bridged those things together. His classical training, and he put it in a cinematic way that for the public, my father wanted it so that the rickshaw-wallas and the every other walk of life would be listening to this music.
Wow.
Instead of just the Bollywood kind of things that were not classically based. He wanted them to be hearing ragas and hearing all these things, and wanted them all to be listening to it. So that was one of his thoughts behind it, and my grandfather approved, which was rare. So
Wow. Yeah. I guess if you feel like I guess there's some. I have a question, like about maybe I would love to hear some stories about Annapurna ji and your aunt, and maybe if you got to spend time with her and
yeah,
her music.
I was able to learn from her here and there. I had some lessons with her. My father always said, if there's anyone else, I tied the thread with my father, and I never learned from anyone else. I mean, my Ashish Da, my older Ashish Khan, my older brother, I would, he would teach me things like guts and different and things like that, and we would sometimes play together, and so I'd learn some things from him and stuff like that, like family. But I never, and then maybe even some older students of my father's, they would tutor me, and show me things and compositions and learn this one. Your father taught it 20 years ago. Learn this composition. So things like that. But other than that, I never learned from anyone else. And my father said, I don't want any raga to be messed up or, change what I'm teaching you, basically. Influence you in a way where you kind of you lose some of what I'm teaching you, your foundation, your raga. So, but he said, my sister, when you're in India, you could learn from my sister, if she'll teach you. And of course she would teach me. She's a very sweet woman, very kind woman. It's really unfortunate she's gone. I would have loved to spend more time with her, as my father for that matter too, but definitely her, because I only saw her when I was in India, and she was a recluse, as many people know, so barely anybody got to see her. And she taught me some interesting things and told me interesting things to shape my perspective a bit. But my father used to say when they were young that she was small, she was short, right? And she played surbahar. And he would say, "Do you want me to get you a ladder to play at the top?" So he'd always be, he's an older brother. He's always teasing her, like, "Do you need a ladder to get to the top notes?" But then, listen to her, and she sounds like a beast.
Yeah.
Sounds like a toy in her hands. When those very few recordings that are in existence of her running up and down the instrument. She said that to me one time. She was like, your father didn't play a lot of sapatans, these kinds of runs up and down like that. He did more boltons and things like that. She's like, but nowadays, everybody's playing in these things, so you should learn some of those. You should practice some of that. So I do. I incorporate some of that into my playing that my father didn't really do. And nowadays it's literally everybody does it. It's like the Steph Curry 3-point half court shot. It's like now, each generation's faster than the next. They do something crazier than the next. So, I have to try and keep up in those ways too. But I can't say that aspect of the music, I find it very impressive. And it's like, oh, wow, as do many people, speed,
Right.
explosions, big things. It's a natural thing to get someone's attention. Just any human being would be like, oh, that's impressive.
Yeah.
The other things that are, alap and raga and meaned and mood and feeling and that kind of stuff is what I'm really drawn to in the music and what I was really taught more of. So that's really where my heart and my mind state is at more. But, and that's the kind of thing where I feel some people are ready to listen to it and some people aren't. Or some people can't recognize it or appreciate it as much, but they're ready to begin the process to be able to do that. Because it's like looking at a painting or something. I mean, for me, I'm not a visual artist, so I'll look at something and be like, wow, it's beautiful. Or someone else might spend an hour looking at that and like going into the color schemes and the shadow and the dimensions and the depths and all these things, where the more you know, the more you learn, the more you can appreciate and love and go deeper into that.
Yeah.
So for some people, what lies at the heart of the music and what I love, which is the soul of it all, it takes some people some time to hear that and train their ear to hear it and recognize it. But when they do, it's so worthwhile because it's so powerful and beautiful. But other people might hear it and recognize it already. They can always learn more about it, but they might recognize it all right off the bat. So that's why there's some people that hear it and they just go like, I was so moved and it's so beautiful and this music is so powerful, and when I heard it, it just went like that. Other people, they're like, yeah, it took time, or it was only a certain kind of instrument or musician that really did that for me more. And
Right.
there's some people like, I like the fast part.
But I mean, when you were playing this just now, Bhagashri Kannada, I was closing my eyes and it feels like the great music and also the realm that your father explored so much of, like, infinite subtlety of tone and of variation in the subtlest way. And I felt that in your alap. I felt that kind of mahal, as they say, that atmosphere.
Thank you.
So,
I mean, that's really what he taught me more than anything is, or I'd say that was the crux. That was the most important, crucial element that tied everything together was, get that.
yeah.
Like compositions, yeah, and da 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 da, da all these things, all these. Sure, all that's there. It's all important, but he would say, watch me and listen to me, Um, and I thought I was doing that for years, but I missed so much stuff. I listened to old lessons that I would, have recorded, and I'm like listening, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm playing this thing, and he'd play a line, and then I'll just play it back, and I'll miss all of these things. I thought probably at the time, yeah, I'm probably getting some of it, or I got it, like I got it, Baba, I had the line. And he's like, no, you're not listening enough. You're missing so much. And I was like, okay, now I hear it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that sounds like when I'm teaching students now something and they're missing all these things. They're missing the subtlety and this finesse of things. And of course, that improved over time, and I was able to grasp those things, but it took time. So I always tell all of my students, and I tell everybody, that's, well, not everybody. I tell everybody that's learning music and trying to learn study Indian classical music. Maybe it applies to other things, but that they should, when they think, I say, listen as close as you possibly can. And when you think you listen as close as you can, listen closer.
Yeah,
Because
totally.
I already know you're missing this, this, and this, and this, and that. So listen as deeply, as closely as you can, and then listen closer. Or deeper. So just automatically think that, have that in mind, because you're trying to grasp all those subtleties, as you said.
Beautifully said. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a few other questions, or if you feel like I could.
Yeah, sure. I can. If there's questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yeah.
One other question from Mr. T. Radhakrishna in Bangalore. Can you tell us about what are Baba's interests otherwise when he is not playing the throat?
He loved to cook and eat good food. He was a master chef, I'll say. His food was famous to all the Indian classical music, all the musicians and around the world, the classical musicians that would come and visit the school, our music school. He would always cook for people if he invited them to the house, and he just wanted people to eat, and always trying to. So, I mean, people just like, especially his dal, was like everyone around the world, everybody in India knew about Kansab's dal. It's like, have you had that? Like, it's incredible, and just his cooking in general. I have so many memories of cooking with him, and I still cook myself those recipes that my mother taught me, that him and her used to cook, and so that's one thing. He liked to do stuff around the house. He liked to blow leaves and vacuum and
Yeah.
clean things. He loved to clean things. He loved to reorganize his room. He's always, every week, I swear, there was like a new configuration of the way that this movable shelf sat, that had his things on it, and then his TV remote over here. He would always moving things around, and he used to clean his. He had a very large temple, and from floor to ceiling temple, that he had all of his statues and all of his holy items, relics, things that he had, from malas to stones to powders to incenses to what, just so many pictures, just like my grandfather had pictures all over the wall. My grandfather and my father, if you go to his room at our house, it has all those pictures all over the place. And then in his temple, he was a very devout man. He was a very devout man, a very God-fearing man. But he also thought music was our religion, and he was one that we used to be Hindu, and we converted to Islam. It's a huge other story, and so he worshipped. He did his namaz. He also did his pujas, both every day. He would do his, and same with my grandfather. He would go to the mosque. He would do his namaz like every day, numerous times as you're supposed to. And he would visit Mashar, the temple. He would go to climb to the top of the temple, hike miles to do it, do his pujas, and so they believed that and they had pictures of everything: Jesus, Buddha, Mary. They had all this Quran, and then all the deities. They believed that they were they believed in something else, and they believed that you probably need all the help you can get, so why not pray to all of them? That's the way I think about it too. I believe every religion, not to get into the subject of all that, but mine is more a spiritual belief. I believe that all the religions have lots of truth to them, and beauty and power that can be drawn from it, and blessings. So why would we say that anything is better than the next? Makes literally no sense to me. Everything should be take the good out of these things, leave the whatever else is rest, and bring everyone together. I like to feel like that when people talk about rasas and moods and ragas, I always say, it's not listed as one of the rasas in every one of the ragas or one of the ones that's highlighted, but I think the most important mood of everything is devotion. Every time I pick up my instrument, I go to a place of worship of the raga, of the instrument of my ancestors, my teacher, his teacher, like that, and everyone that came before. That is the underlying core of all the other moves that come from it, because no matter what I'm doing, I have that in me when I'm starting. And I think, and my father and grandfather, they prayed to everything. They felt like you need all the blessings you can get, right? So, and when my grandfather died, they had Muslims. He was buried instead of cremated, but both Muslims and Hindus carried his casket, to his samadhi, like that, to his tomb. So he brought everyone together, and that's what music can do, and that's what my family has always been about. So that's something I'm very proud of, and that's something that I continue in my own beliefs, a spiritual belief. I believe in everything, the good in all of it, the power in all of it.
Yeah, this is such a beautiful. I mean, it's exemplified in your family, and also, I mean, Bismillah Khan Saab or some of the other maestros who it really shows this music that evolved in the north really has this kind of spiritual but not religious kind of, like, not necessarily one religion, but it's like beautifully said, devotion, and like channeling. Oh, sorry, I lost you for a second. Okay, yeah. I mean, that question, by the way, was from Mr. T. Radhakrishna. He's a senior disciple of Pandit Ravi Shankar ji. He just, so I just thought I'd mention. And
thank you for the question.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening, tuning in.
Busy right now. Let's see what we have here. So there are a few questions relating to, if we have time, a few more minutes, relating to.
You tell me. I'm happy to if you'd like to continue.
But it was a more of a technical question about ornaments, about Andolin, and how Baba spoke about that.
Yeah, I can tell you that Andolin, he would say that Andolin should be treated like a lotus flower floating on the water.
Huh.
But it should never get it should never float so much that the water gets on the lotus. Meaning that it should never sound out of tune, right? It should never be dissonant. If you have, other musical styles, they have, people think microtones mean, and shrutis and Andolin means that we play with these, where we hold the notes that to our ear is perceived as dissonant. If you take it to a Western ear or an Indian classical trained ear, like, other kinds of music from Middle East or Turkey or whatever it is, oud, or these kinds of instruments where they're holding these notes that to us they are in between, and they're holding them so they feel like they're slightly dissonant to that ear, which I actually enjoy that too. It's a different style, it's just a different style of thing. But for in the context of Indian classical, if you're playing too much, if you're doing like, if I held this, it's out of tune.
Right.
The water's on the lotus at that point, right? So you basically want to be able to show that it's floating beautifully without having that happen. And it's just a nice imagery that I like to think of sometimes. And the importance of Andolin, ati komal, ati komal, ati komal. Is it coming from below? Is it coming from above? All these things kind of go into rendering a particular note correctly in a certain raga. My grandfather used to say to my father, wrong, 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 wrong when he was playing. And one of the stories was that it took my father 12 years to learn the Komal Re of Shri Rag.
Wow.
So after 12 years, my grandfather said, that's what it is. But I mean, to us, we probably loved all those recordings that he played. It was probably, I don't know exactly when that happened, if it was before recordings or during the recordings or what it was, but we probably would have loved it. But, to my grandfather, he was like, no. So my father did spend a lot of time on that. He didn't like to go into like theoretical kind of stuff, like people measure shrutis and all these kinds of things. He would never talk about music in that way. He would just show you. And either you got it or you didn't. But anyway.
Along those lines, maybe like for example, the Komal, you were talking about Komal Ray of Shri and how it differs from Marwa or Bhairav, or the Komal Gandhar of Darbari compared to Malkons or yeah.
Yeah.
If you feel like demonstrating
Oh,
those.
I don't know. I mean, I that's another thing. Like talking about it is never really so easy. It's more about something when you're playing. But I mean, for me, I feel like I just remember the lessons that stuck out that my father would really say that this raga is ati ati komal, or he would show. But then sometimes when he'd play, he would play a version where it was a little bit more like the average of them.
Uh-huh.
Like it would almost be a vibrato kind of effect where there's a kind of general kind of ondulin placed on most notes, like, or like, as opposed to something's on the higher register of God, and one is going to ati komal, ati komal, when you're going in kanra and things like this, or shri and ragas like that. Those were a lot of emphasis put on those kinds of notes and ragas. But some ragas, it was more of like maybe like an average of things, or some recordings sounded like that, where like he's not going there with that one in this recording. But the lesson I just had, we went to a different place where it was like, no, it's like this. Maybe the day he wasn't feeling it and he wanted just to show just komal ga or da or whatever, and then another day he's like, or maybe the audience would appreciate it more, so he'd really be in the mood to do it, or his instrument was responding or not, so he could feel like he could do it. I don't know, but certain things differed from time to time. There was like a all the way version, and then a version that sometimes is like, just kind of maybe like the average of them or something. But that's just, I
As
feel
per
like
his
that's
mood,
something.
perhaps. Or like as per the day, as per the mood kind of vibe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
But he might tell me that I'm just totally talking nonsense, and that it's just like, no, you're just not hearing it right at that time. So it could be that too. I mean, to be inside, what we always try to do is being students of these maestros is to get inside the mind of the maestro. Especially like I was teaching my students at the Ali Akbar College recently. The last semester we had, people have been asking me for years to teach Rag Chandranandan. My father is arguably his most famous creation. And I always am like, no, because it's the kind of raga where you have to get inside the mind of that person to do it, because it's a more modern raga, and it's a raga that was created from someone and their whole accumulative, experiences, their time, their whole life of learning music is where that raga came from. So and it's really, really only that person that really does that raga too. So you have to get inside their mind in a way, and it's hard. It's probably never doing justice to it enough. But you got to really treat it carefully, and you got to try to think where they're coming from. So I finally did teach a composition in that, and I really I had to think about it a lot, to try to get to that place of where he was coming from. And I'm sure I didn't get there, but hopefully I got there enough, and I would have loved to play it for him and see what he'd say, so I could learn myself, But
almost like connecting to like some kind of source, and then it just flows from there. No.
yeah, and it's the bottom line is always the feeling of it, trying to connect to the feeling of it, because you can throw this note and that, and you can throw that note and that, and you can do this and that, and it's like, but I see people sometimes playing that raga and they're just like playing these crazy tons. I'm like, first off, my father didn't even play those kinds of tons. So if someone created a raga that's young, how can you play those kinds of lines if the creator of it never did?
Right.
It's an interesting discussion to have on that. It's like, because are you just playing scales at this point? And in that, for that matter, are you doing that with other ragas you're playing too? Because if you actually thoughtfully think of how to construct a tan in that type of raga, it wouldn't sound like that. Because now you're sounding like you're playing another kind of kosh.
Right.
You're sounding like you're playing non-kosh, or you're sounding like you're playing a different kind of kosh at that point. Where's the Chandranandan?
Right.
Some ragas also don't need to be played fast. They're supposed to be played at a certain speed so that you can appreciate them. That's what my father would talk about that too. I saw a workshop of Zakirji where he was talking about something similar with tabla. The composition shouldn't be done at that speed. The way I think of it is like it's like you're trying to show someone around the city metaphor, right? Trying to show them around the raga, and you're like zooming 100 miles an hour down at like a city block. It's like you're not going to see anything. Maybe if you're on an open expanse of like a mountain in the distance, 100 miles an hour doesn't matter at all. But like everything should be done in its certain speed that it works for it, you know?
Yeah, it's about the feeling. It's about expression, and but sometimes I guess some people are. These days everything is so like with social media and people's attention span is so low. I feel like
Yeah.
some artists choose to
They
take
gotta
another route.
make an explosion, you know? They gotta
Yeah.
play a super fast ton and light their instrument on fire and smash it. We don't do that in Indian music, but yeah. But I mean, that'll really catch someone's attention.
I think there was one question about that actually. You know, the times we live in, social media, and this kind of music, kind of the core of it surviving in this context, and how you feel about that.
Indian classical surviving in the modern age.
Yeah, I guess we
Yeah,
could.
I mean, who knows? I mean, I I think that you know, uh, I feel like as long as the tradition remains intact, then it's fine. You know, people can push the limits. People can fully do contemporary music or fusion or get out of playing classical. But as long as they learned the tradition and their foundation is strong, and they spent years dedicated to learning the system, the tradition, and all that, then they can go forward and do other things with the music. But people that don't really know the music and they're just like want to jam with other people, it's like, okay, I mean, you're basically playing the instrument.
Right.
You're not really playing Indian classical music, and you're not really even coming from Indian classical music. You're just coming from somebody that learned to noodle on the sitar or sarod or whatever, and you're just playing fusion now. So people that actually know the tradition and possibly know the other music styles they like, or they don't know how to play it, but they've listened to a lot of it, or they find a way where the integrity is maintained and that they meet in that
Right.
way. Then that stuff's cool. But as far as classical, I think this thing of merging all the Gharanas together, which people do nowadays, where they kind of use it as a strength. Like he wasn't trained in only one, but three. It's like in the old days that was not a necessarily a positive from what I've gathered. It was that you have your Gharana, your teacher, and you play that style. I think that you should learn your one style very well and spend a lot of time doing that. And then and or throughout appreciate other styles and learn to draw from other styles that you enjoy. But know when you're crossing over from what you learn from your style into another one. If you're not conscious of that, then you don't know where you belong. And you don't know where what comes from what. So know where each thing comes from. That's what I'd say. And keep these traditions and this information intact, because who are we to say that we know more than these great maestros before that really believed in that system? You know, they believed in also taking other things from other styles, but they were trained in, and their core was from that one style, at least for instrumental. And they had a power, at least I'm talking about my father right now, for me personally, they had a power that was achieved. There was a power that was released through the music. They touched something that was so just divine, incredible. It would just took us on a journey. That kind of thing was done by holding on to these kinds of beliefs. So some of these beliefs should be kept. Some of them can probably be thrown out, some things here and there and some stuff, or they can be moved in the Bruce Lee kind of
Yeah.
school of thought. You can move past it, take what you want and move past these things. I believe in that too. But I do believe in tradition, and as long as some part of that is, the core is there, then you can go as far as you want.
Beautiful. I feel like it's almost like you're paying respect to all these generations of musicians this has evolved with so much thought and care, and so we're the recipient of that. So yeah, um,
Yeah.
beautiful. So that's, I mean, I think anything that you want to say in conclusion or play a little bit, or I think
Oh,
people are
that's
really appreciating. You can read all the comments after, or
sure. No, it's
yeah,
a pleasure. It's a pleasure to talk to everybody. I always love being able to share the music and discuss it. And it's my pleasure. If you want to do more of these kinds of things, I'd say subscribe, because honestly, nowadays the way I'm looking at the way everything's going, obviously with the world right now, and we're all kind of like travel is being kind of like opened up and then closed down and like don't do it. And it's like for me, I'm kind of like I hope the world goes back to that kind of thing. But if it doesn't, I want to be able to I want to be able to have people access me and what I'm giving directly from the source. Like I don't want to have to go through people. So I like having a subscription platform. Like mine is Patreon. I thought about it for years, and finally I was like, you know what? I think this is the good way to do it, because I can do my podcast about these kinds of subjects, things I find interesting. I can do my concerts. I can offer concerts and recordings, unreleased stuff. I just released an album that's only for Patreon subscribers, and then Q&A discussions, lessons, uh, movies, films that I've been a part of, or all kinds of stuff. So I mean, really, the way to access me and my music these days, whether I'm playing a concert or I'm doing a workshop with, say, BRM or another group, that's also happening. But I just want to be able to create and go directly to the people that value this, rather than like try to convince the whole world of listening to Indian classical music, or me for that matter. If the people that are on my thing really want to access this, and I was like, everyone's like, I miss this and I miss that. I'm always putting stuff on social media and all these things, and I felt I'm sick of doing all that. Like I can go directly to all these people by switching it up, and I feel like it's a great way of doing it these days. And even if concerts come back, I may continue just doing it this way, because I have a community. It's a community of people, right? And I'm all about creating community. The Ali Akbar College of Music community that I grew up in, I'm still a part of, and the greater world is connected through the internet now, and then now my Patreon community. It's pretty awesome. So, if anybody wants more of things, of all things that I do, that's really the way to do it, and through the Ali Akbar College of Music. And if you want to learn, you can access all this stuff. But now using the internet age to our advantage, and in these times, especially when we're stuck in our homes, right? So,
yeah.
but but yeah, other than that, no, I don't have anything else to say. But thank you for having me. It's
Thank you
nice
for,
talking with you, Jay.
yeah, nice to talk to you too after a while. Yeah. So, and hopefully we'll do it again soon, and
Yeah,
sometime. And okay.
yeah. Stay well. Namaskar, everyone that was tuning in, and thank you, BRM. And I'll talk to you soon, Jay.
Okay. All
All right,
right.
man. All right. Bye.